The construction of the transcontinental Western Europe-Western China highway was completed several years ago, and it has become much more comfortable to overcome the huge spaces of the Great Steppe via this modern autobahn.
Конечная точка нашей экспедиции – это остров Возрождения.
The expedition's destination is the Rebirth Island, or Ostrov Vozrozhdeniya in Russian, in the middle of the former Aral Sea. It's hard to comprehend the current challenges in the Aral Sea area without digging a little deeper into history and getting acquainted with this Sirdarya river. Let me show you our route on the map, for you to get an idea of where we are going. We started from Almaty, passed through Taraz and Shymkent, and in Turkestan we went to an archaeological site undergoing excavation. I mean the ancient citadel and city of Yassi. The archaeologists have discovered an ancient settlement in the very center of the modern city of Turkestan. Back in the 10th century, it was known as Shavagar, and from the 12th century, it was renamed into Yassi. It was one of the important hubs on the northern branch of the Great Silk Road, stretching along the mighty Sirdarya River.
40 километрах от Туркестана.
40 kilometers from Turkestan, there is another very famous site, Sauran. It's one of the ancient cities along the Sirdarya. Its ruins are quite well preserved.
Развалины очень хорошо сохранились.
Sauran is mentioned in the notes of Arab travelers of the 9th, 10th centuries. In the 16th century, it was still a large city of the Qazaq Khanate. Protecting the city from enemy raids and maintaining sophisticated urban infrastructure required significant financial backing. The money came from trade, but in the late 17th century, when the Great Silk Road lost its significance due to wars, Sauran also gradually fell into decline. All these cities along the Sirdarya were agricultural centers and thus heavily depended on water resources. In his work, The Best Divisions in the Knowledge of the Regions, the 10th century Arab traveler Al-Maqdisi described the development of cotton and rice production in the Sirdarya Valley. In the Middle Ages, the irrigated area wasn't very large, and the agriculture could not affect the water balance seriously. Yet, in the second half of the 20th century, the irrigated land in the Amudarya and Sirdarya basins had expanded several-fold. Most scientists agree it was the main driver behind the global environmental disaster that had unfolded afterwards. In 1989, the sea broke up into the northern small and southern Big Aral Seas. In 2014, the eastern part of the Big Aral Sea dried up completely.
Вот это вот Сырдарья.
This is the Sirdarya.
Разливы большие.
Here it floods the area and flows into the small Aral Sea near the Kokaral Dam.
Плотины, Кокоральской плотины.
The first dam separating the Big and Small Aral Seas was erected in 1997, but was destroyed by a storm 2 years later. In 2005, a new dam was built.
Наш план такой проехать через северо.
Our plan is to drive along the northwestern coast of the small Aral Sea, then visit the Balsa-Kelmes Reserve, and then go further to the south, to the border between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, where the Vojroshdenia Island is located. Although today's it's no longer an island, but a part of the Aralkum Desert.
Просто часть пустыни Аралкум.
The former Vozrozhdeniya Island and now the area with the same name is located in Muynaq district of the Republic of Karakalpakstan and Aral district of Qazaq region of Kazakhstan. In 2001, the island turned into a peninsula and by 2012 was absorbed by the Aral desert. The Vozrozhdeniya Island gained fame thanks to the close city of Aralsk 7 or Kantubak, near which the Bakan biochemical test site was located.
А на обратном пути посетите археологические объекты.
On the way back, we are going to visit the archaeological sites of Kerderi 1 and Kerderi 2 and Asar Aral. We also want to get to the Kaska Kulan well, where a stable Kulan population is living currently, 500 heads. They migrated there from the island of Basak-el-Mes when it became waterless.
Остался без воды.
From Kazakh, Kamistibas translates as a place of dense reeds. Once upon a time, the huge Sirdarya Delta consisted of thousands of lakes, streams and islands. Reed thickets and Tugay woods stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Tigers and countless herds of wild boars roamed the area. Yesterday, we covered 1,600 kilometers to get to the starting point of our route. The journey across the actual bottom of the Aral Sea will begin on the shore of Lake Kamistibas. We need to wait for the staff of the reserve and the representatives of the International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea to join us to go to the Vojroshdenia Island together. Lake Kamistibas has always been famous for its abundance of fish. Unfortunately, we see that over the past year the water level has dropped 3 meters. The last 2 years have been really low water throughout the whole Central Asia. We hope that in the future there will be more precipitation and the lake's water level will rise. Remember our faces, because we are leaving for the Basak-el-Mes. When Basak-el-Mes was still an island in the middle of a stormy sea, fishermen returning from their fishing missions would sometimes get into storms and sink. Hence the second gloomy island's name, the place of no return. Our good old friends Bolat Kabikanuli Bekniyaz and Zauresh Jansultan Kazi Alimbatova have devoted their lives to saving the Aral Sea. They can share a lot of interesting things with us.
Одна из тех запланированных и долгожданных.
One of the big news this year is the accession of wetlands to the Basak-el-Mes Reserve.
Угодий Барсакельмесскому заповеднику. В настоящее время у
Now the reserve has a site on the Aral Sea, the so-called Delta site, where the main fish spawning takes place and the waterfowl gather.
с рыбой и там, где собираются водоплавающие птицы.
Delta sections of the Sirdarya River were included in the list of the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands of international importance.
Нашел такую удивительную вещь. В мире очень хорошо развита.
It is amazing how increasingly developed geoarchaeology is becoming around the world. When, thanks to geological and geomorphological signs, it becomes possible to locate archaeological sites. This approach is very much suitable for the area where we are now, because the main reason for abandoning ancient cities and settlements was the lack of water. The same Sirdarya and Amu Darya are carrying a lot of silt and thus change their course very quickly. So people are forced to follow the rivers, abandon a place and go build another city. Without water, there is no life. Just remember the famous Janskent, the Oghuz capital in the pre-Mongol era, around 10th, 12th centuries. Another town, Jant, was close to it. Is it the birthplace of Seljuk, the founder of the Ottoman Empire? Yes. Jant was an industrial city. They made weapons there and minted coins. Janskent was located not too far away. Interestingly enough, archaeologists are still searching for Jant's actual location. During the pandemic, for 2 to 3 months, I sat at home reading all these books, examined old maps and ancient atlases. I compared many facts and, as a result, by coordinates, I think I finally found the place. It must be Gent.
Я так думаю, что это Жент.
In the face of climate change and increasing freshwater stress, scientists around the world are focusing on water-efficient and water-saving technologies and replacement of water-intensive crops with less moisture-intensive ones.
Мы сейчас с немецкими коллегами, учеными из Германии,
Together with our German colleagues, we have been implementing a 3-year research project called Candir ticks. Candir, or rammy root, is a plant from the ham family that grows on this territory. There are 2 Candir species. By its properties, Candir is better than cotton, but consumes several times less water. The demand for Candir in Germany is huge.
очень большой спрос на киндер.
The population in Central Asia is growing, but the water resources are dwindling, showing a clear downward trend. Thus, we need to save our water.
Рыба или хлопок? Хлопок или рыба?
Fish or cotton? Cotton or fish? Most certainly, it's impossible to redesign the hard-built agricultural system focusing on rice and cotton farming just like that. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are currently facing quite a complicated task.
Очень непростая задача.
Clothes, food and equipment are carefully packed, the tanks are full of gasoline, the expedition is ready to start.
Цель сегодняшней экспедиции – это остров Возрождения. Все знают об этом острове.
Our today's destination is the Vojroshdenia Island. Everyone has probably heard about it, but very few people have actually visited the place. It's located in the border zone, on the border between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. What's so remarkable about this island, you might ask? For example, the fact that in Kazakhstan's part of the Aral Sea, not a single ship of the former Aral fleet has remained. The internet is full of pictures of such ships, but unfortunately they are not there in reality. In difficult times, he was allowed to cut them for scrap metal. And as I mentioned before, unfortunately we lost this unique tourist cluster, the ships of the dried-up Aral Sea. Yet several ships and barges have still remained on the Vozrozhdeniya Island.
Кораблей, барж.
The road is snaking along lakes and canals, and then dives into a sandy desert. Since yesterday, I have this weird feeling that this trip will completely change our outlook on life.
Я согласился поехать на остров Возрождения.
I agreed to go to the Vozrozhdenia Island to get reborn after the pandemic. During the lockdown, I gained 15 extra kilograms in hope to get back in shape during the expedition. We are approaching the mouth of the Sirdarya River. To the left of the road, we see some flooded areas. This is the northern Aral Sea.
Международный фонд спасения Орала в Республике Казахстан пошел вот по такому.
The International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea did the following. We won a tender for setting up a hunting farm on the Kokoral Peninsula. It's in the northern Aral Sea. The size of the hunting farm is 47,000 hectares. We are responsible for establishing the farm, issuing entrance tickets and hunting licenses, but do not let anyone shoot anything. It's a kind of public reserve. It's a breeding ground. Many birds nest here. This coast, for example, has a lot of fish and fowl.
И птицы, и рыба.
It's so nice to see once again how animals and birds are gradually returning to the Sirdarya Delta.
Мы с вами находимся на гидроузле Аклак, который находится на реке Сырдарья.
We are at the Accession hydropower complex on the Sirdarya River. This is the last installation between the dry land and the sea. This hydro facility was designed to increase the discharge of the Sirdarya River, especially during the spring flood and freeze-up periods. Its second purpose is to maintain the water level in the coastal lake system. Directly from here, the Sirdarya flows into the Aral Sea. The Aral Sea is on the other side of the Aral Dam. It's about 25 kilometers from the Accession hydropower facility to the Aral Dam. We could have covered this distance in 40 minutes, if not a little on the road repair. The Aral Dam is 13 kilometers long. This is the spillover through which the main amount of water from the small Aral Sea goes to the southern Aral Sea. In order not to let the stormy water destroy the dam during the spring flood, the facility operates at its full capacity. In the off-season, the water accumulates in the northern part of the sea.
Высота этой плотины около 6 метров. За счет этой плотины уровень...
The height of this dam is about 6 meters. Thanks to the dam, the water level in the Aral Sea rose by 4 meters, and now it's about 42 meters. In the future, we hope to raise the water level of the northern Aral Sea up to the designed 48-50 meters. There are two ways to do it, either making the Aral Dam higher by another 6 meters or building another dam in the Sari-Shiganag Bay area. In the 60s, they used to catch up to 60,000 tons of fish in the Aral Sea. In the 2000s, the water in the sea got so mineralized that only flounder could survive in it. Now the annual fish yield in the small Aral Sea exceeds 6,000 tons of fish of 14 freshwater species. Last year, we launched a project to install a fish protection facility at the Aral Dam. Do you remember last year we told you that a lot of fish dies? It rolls through the Aral Dam together with water into the southern Aral Sea. The water there is bad, it's too salty for fish, and practically all the fish dies. Some reclamation fishing is carried out, but according to the estimates of the Fishery Research Institute, about 4,000 tons of fish just dies. This is a hydroacoustic fish protection installation patented by Kazakhstan's Fishery Research Institute. Special acoustic devices, like speakers, are fixed on the pontoons. The fish protection system generates sounds at different frequencies, repelling fish. In order to save money, it operates only during the mass fish migration. In 1989, the Aral Peninsula turned into a land bridge between the small and big Aral Seas. We've been on the road for 38 hours already, including 8 hours of sleep at most. As you can see, we are already driving through the Takir or salt marsh area. We need more light. In the past, the Aral Peninsula was full of life. There were many fishing villages on it. In the early 2000s, many fishermen left the coastal villages but came back to their native land after the seas started coming back. In the village, you can do a short pit stop, enjoy a dip in the spring, test yourself in milking camels, and spoil yourself with a good cup of fresh-made kumis. It's not without reason that in the East they say, trust in God, but tie your camel. If you don't tie its leg while milking it, it can hit you real hard with it. Camel farming has always been developed in these arid lands. Camels can find their own food in the desert almost all year round. Our short break is over. We need to plan our further route and stock up on gasoline. No time to lose. The steep shores of the retreating sea are called chinks or cliffs in English. The western coast of the Aral Sea is simultaneously the eastern section of the Usturt Plateau. The geographical term chink was introduced into scientific circulation specifically to refer to the Table Usturt Plateaus. In this area, you can travel back in time to the distant past of our planet. Here you can find petrified remains of marine organisms of the ancient Sarmatian Sea, which more than 20 million years ago included the current Aral, Caspian, Azov and Black Seas. The modern Aral Sea formed 16 to 18,000 years ago during the Ice Age.
Геологическое понятие Аральская котловина было заполнено.
The geological Aral depression was filled with water, which, according to some theories, came from the north, from the West Siberian lowland to be exact. At the time of glaciation, the Siberian rivers got diked, and the West Siberian lowland was filled with water. Then the breakthrough took place along the Turgai Trough.
Прорыв по Тургайскому прогибу.
Once the depth of the Aral Sea near its western coast reached 65 meters, the sea waves were splashing at the chink's crest.
Сейчас море далеко отсюда, видны только вот.
Now the sea is far from here. You can only see coastal ramparts. The sea itself is about 3-4 kilometers away.
Вода есть.
Now there is water in the western section, but it's very salty.
Достигает 100.
Mineralization reaches 100-150 grams per liter. Brine fish or artemia live there. And where there are artemia, there will be flamingos, right?
Фламинго.
Artemia salina are plankton crustaceans inhabiting extremely salty water bodies with mineralization up to 300 parts per mil. This is an adult artemia. They collect their cysts. Artemia proteins contain 18 amino acids used in pharmaceutical production. Dried artemia eggs are also used for aquaculture and aquarium fish. About 1,500 tons of artemia eggs are produced in Kazakhstan annually. Judging by the information on the internet, in Western countries the price for processed artemia cysts reaches $200 per kilogram, while the Chinese merchants buy them raw 13 times cheaper. We have encountered a squad of artemia harvesters on the Aral Sea coast. We have been collecting artemia cysts for over 20 years now. We started in Aktau with a joint US-Belgian-Kazakh company. We have our own crews, equipment, and our own artemia processing plants. We go along the coast in the wind direction and collect them with dip nets and shovels. Do you often see flamingos here? They are all over the place. Do they feed on artemia? Yes. In fact, they are our competitors. In fact, we can collect up to 30-50 kilogram bags per day. It's about 1,500 kilograms. But there's a lot of sand there. The flamingos collect it clean. Easy math. One flamingo needs about 700 grams of artemia per day. So 1,000 flamingos collect 7 tons of clean artemia a day. If all the harvested raw material is processed and sold at international prices, then this valuable natural resource can help creating many jobs and ensure significant tax revenue. Thousands of flamingos nest in the salty shallow waters of the southern Aral Sea. Flamingo is also a valuable natural resource. Which tourist or photographer does not dream of taking a couple of images of this beautiful bird? There are 17 million bird watchers, lovers of watching birds in the world today. The picturesque Aral Sea chinks attract tourists and photographers from around the world. Not rushing through the neighborhood, you can encounter a lot of interesting things.
На западном чинке Аральского моря буквально за
On the western chink, in just half an hour, we have collected 2 dozens of paleontological finds.
сложно оценить их.
It's hard for us to determine their scientific value, but they can be dated for sure.
Что такое? Это раковина какая-то первого.
Take this gold lip, for instance. It looks like a dinosaur nose or a beak, don't you think?
На клюв.
"20 to 30 million years ago, the local climate was tropical. The shores of the shallow bays were full of the so-called tugai fauna. Indricotheria, tapirs, calicotheres, Eminodontidae, you name it. Petrified mammalian remains are more difficult to find than mollusks, but experts still find them. In recent years, scientific paleontological tourism has gained great popularity. Collecting antiquities excites not only professional researchers, but likewise advanced amateurs.
Период жизни этих встречающихся моллюсков, он довольно широкий.
These mollusks lived here for quite some time, from Paleocene to Neocene, from Cretaceous deposits approximately.
По этим коллекциям точную дату, конечно,
Thus, you can't tell the exact date based on these collections, but they can be all identified.
просто очень приятно, что находятся вот такие
It's nice to find such interesting and perfectly preserved artifacts.
сохранившиеся отлично.
2 to 3 years will pass, and unfortunately, this calcium coating will deteriorate. Only the fossil form will remain.
И уже останется только окаменелый.
For this reason, I think finding and collecting them for educational purposes, for paleontological museums, is a good thing to do.
Учебных целей для палеонтологических музеев это очень правильно.
The bottom of the eastern part of the Big Aral Sea has turned into a huge and perfectly flat tarkir or salt marsh. You can speed up to 80 kilometers per hour. We are heading for Karderi.
Вот это священный камень, метеорит, он упал прямо.
This stone is sacred. It's a meteorite that fell right in the middle of the Aral Sea. And if you put your hands on it and make a wish, it will probably come true. Doran, what are you wishing for? Happiness.
Ну, я хитрил тут немного.
Well, I cheated a little.
Рассказываешь, о,
You know that if you tell someone about your wish, it will never come true.
скажу, извини.
I am happy